Marcus Chen stood in the gleaming lobby of Quantum Solutions headquarters, his worn shoes reflecting the marble floor beneath him. His daughter's drawing of a rainbow tucked inside his portfolio like a talisman, and as the receptionist's eyes flickered from his faded suit to the group of polished candidates waiting for the same senior engineering position, he felt the familiar weight of being invisible settle over his shoulders once again. "Mr. Chen, they're ready for you," the receptionist said, her voice professionally neutral, and Marcus straightened his tie, the same one he'd worn to his wife Sarah's funeral 2 years ago, and walked into the conference room, where 3 executives sat like judges behind a long glass table. The lead interviewer, a sharp-faced woman named Victoria Hunt, barely glanced up from his resume before her expression shifted to something between pity and dismissal. "Mr. Chen, I see you have a significant gap in your employment history. 6 years, she said, tapping her pen against the paper. "I was a stay-at-home father," Marcus replied, his voice steady despite the heat rising to his face. "My wife Sarah was a cardiothorax surgeon, and we decided I would raise our daughter Lily while she pursued her career." The other interviewers exchanged glances, and Marcus knew that look. He'd seen it at the grocery store when he was the only dad at school pickup, seen it at parent-teacher conferences, seen it in the eyes of people who couldn't understand why a man with a master's degree in electrical engineering from MIT would choose diapers over circuits. "That's very noble," Victoria continued, her tone suggesting it was anything but. "But technology has evolved considerably in 6 years. Cloud architecture, quantum computing frameworks, AI integration, these aren't things you can learn from parenting blogs." Marcus felt the words like physical blows, each one a dismissal of the hardest, most important work he'd ever done. The 3 a.m. fevers, the multiplication tables sung as lullabies, the way he'd held Lily the night she asked why mommy never came home from the hospital, the scholarship applications he'd helped her with, the science fair projects, the tears and triumphs, and 1,000 tiny moments that had made up their life together. "I've been studying," he said quietly, pulling out a tablet that had seen better days. Its screen cracked in one corner from when Lily had accidentally dropped it. "I've completed 17 online certifications, built 3 applications currently being used by the local school district to help kids with learning disabilities, and I've been consulting remotely for." But Victoria was already standing, her smile professional and final. "Thank you for coming in, Mr. Chen. We have several other candidates to see today. We'll be in touch." They wouldn't be in touch. They both knew it. Tanned as Marcus walked out of that conference room, his portfolio clutched against his chest. He felt the crushing weight of another door closing, another opportunity lost, another month where he'd have to choose between Lily's art classes and the electric bill. He moved through the building in a daze, past the motivational posters about innovation and thinking differently, past the employees in their expensive casual wear, laughing over coffee, past the evidence of a world that had moved on without him. And he was almost to the elevator when he heard raised voices coming from a corner office with floor 2 ceiling windows. "I don't care what it costs," a man's voice boomed, raw with desperation. "We launch in 6 hours, and the entire quantum encryption module is failing. 6 months of work, $20 million in investor money, and we have a corruption error we can't even identify." Marcus should have kept walking, should have gotten into that elevator and gone home to Lily, who was waiting at his sister's apartment, probably doing homework at the kitchen table, maybe wondering if today would be the day her daddy finally got the job that would let them afford their own place again. But something in that voice stopped him. Some frequency of desperation he recognized from his own reflection, and he found himself turning toward the office. Through the glass, he could see a man in his 50s, silver-haired and elegant even in crisis, jabbing at a laptop while 2 younger engineers stood helplessly beside him. The screen displayed lines of code and a flashing error message, and even from the doorway, even after 6 years away, Marcus's brain began parsing the pattern. He knocked softly on the doorframe. The silver-haired man looked up, irritation flashing across his features. If you're not here to fix this nightmare, I don't have time, he snapped. Your quantum encryption module, Marcus said, stepping into the office, his voice gaining strength from somewhere deep and forgotten. The corruption isn't in your encryption algorithm. It's a timing issue in your buffer synchronization. You're running a quantum classical hybrid system, right? The classical verification is processing faster than the quantum state can stabilize, so you're getting decoherence before the encryption completes. The room went silent. The silver-haired man Marcus recognized him now as James Hartwell. The CEO, whose face was on the cover of tech magazines, stared at him with an expression of pure shock. Who the hell are you? He whispered. I'm nobody, Marcus said, and meant it. I just interviewed for a position. I'm leaving. But if you adjust your buffer timing by even 50 microseconds and implement a handshake protocol between your quantum and classical systems, your corruption should resolve. He started to turn away, but James's hand shot out. Wait, show me. And somehow Marcus found himself at the CEO's laptop, his fingers remembering patterns they hadn't traced in years, muscle memory waking from a long sleep. The code was elegant, sophisticated, but there buried deep in the integration layer was the timing mismatch he'd recognized, the kind of thing you could only see if you'd spent years thinking about synchronization problems, the kind of problem he'd actually written his thesis on a lifetime ago. His fingers flew across the keyboard, adjusting parameters, inserting 3 lines of code that created a verification handshake, recompiling the module. 15 seconds. That's all it took. 15 seconds to implement a fix for a problem that had paralyzed an entire engineering team for days. Marcus hit execute, and they all watched as the error message disappeared, replaced by a steady green confirmation light. Run a full diagnostic, James breathed to one of the engineers, who scrambled to comply. 2 minutes later, the diagnostic completed. 0 errors, encryption stable, system operational. My God, James whispered, sinking into his chair. My God, you just saved us. Do you have any idea what you just did? This launch is the cornerstone of our entire year. Our investors, our reputation, everything was riding on this. And my entire team has been fighting this bug for 72 hours straight. He looked up at Marcus with wonder and confusion. You said you interviewed. For what position? Why aren't you already working here? Marcus felt something break open inside him. All the rejection and exhaustion and quiet desperation of the last 2 years pouring out. I interviewed for senior engineer. I was told my skills were outdated. I haven't worked in industry for 6 years because I stayed home to raise my daughter after my wife passed away. Apparently, that makes me unemployable. The words came out harder than he intended, edged with bitterness he usually kept buried, and James's expression shifted from confusion to something darker. Victoria Hunt, he said, not a question. Yes, sir. James stood, his jaw tight. Victoria is an excellent operations manager, but she doesn't conduct interviews anymore as of right now. You just solved in 15 seconds what my entire engineering department couldn't crack in 3 days. You looked at code you'd never seen before, in frameworks that didn't exist when you left the industry, and you identified a problem so subtle and complex that engineers with current experience missed it completely. He walked to the window, looking out over the city. My son is 12, he said quietly, his voice changing, becoming something softer and more human. I've missed every one of his birthdays for the last 5 years. Every school play, every baseball game. I tell myself it's for him, that I'm building something that will secure his future. But the truth is he barely knows me. Last month he stopped asking when I'd be home. James turned back to Marcus, and there were tears in the CEO's eyes. You spent 6 years being a father, actually being present, actually doing the work, making the sacrifice. And the world punished you for it. We punished you for it. I'm standing here, absent from my son's life. Celebrated on magazine covers, while you, someone who made the harder choice, who did the more important work, get rejected in my building. The vulnerability in James's voice unlocked something in Marcus, and suddenly he was talking, really talking. Words spilling out about Sarah's last days, about how she'd made him promise to put Lily first, about the loneliness of being a widower and a single father, about the 1,000 invisible ways the world diminished him for choosing care over career, about how Lily had asked him just last week if they would ever have a real home again, about how he'd felt his own worth shrinking with each rejection letter, each pitying look, each person who couldn't see past the gap in his resume to the person he'd become. She draws me pictures, Marcus said, his voice breaking. Every morning before I leave for interviews, Lily draws me a rainbow, or a superhero, or a good luck charm. She tapes them to my portfolio and tells me I'm the smartest daddy in the world, and I walk into rooms where people look at me like I'm broken, like I've wasted my life, and I try to hold on to what she sees in me. James wiped his eyes unashamedly. Your daughter is right, he said firmly. You are exactly the kind of person we need here. Not just because you're brilliant, though you clearly are, but because you understand priority. You understand what actually matters. I've built a company worth hundreds of millions of dollars, but I'm losing my son. You raised your daughter through grief and hardship, and she draws you pictures because she knows she's loved. He pulled out his phone. I'm calling an emergency executive meeting. I'm offering you the position of Chief Innovation Officer, reporting directly to me. The salary is $300,000 plus equity. You'll build your own team, set your own priorities, and you'll work reasonable hours, because I need someone to remind me and everyone else here that we're humans first, employees second. Marcus couldn't breathe, couldn't process what he was hearing. Sir, I don't. That's not necessary. It's absolutely necessary, James interrupted. Do you know what the original vision for this company was? To use technology to improve people's lives. Somewhere along the way, we forgot that. We started measuring success in stock prices and market share instead of actual human impact. You've been out of the industry for 6 years, and in 30 seconds, you reminded me why we started this in the first place. He extended his hand. Please, help me build something better. Help me remember what matters. Marcus thought of Lily waiting at his sister's cramped apartment, thought of the eviction notice he'd hidden in his drawer, thought of all the ways he'd felt invisible and diminished, and then he thought of Sarah's last words. Show her what integrity looks like. Show her that kindness and brilliance can coexist. Be the father she deserves. He took James's hand. I have one condition, Marcus said, his voice steady. Whatever policies we implement, whatever culture we build, it has to honor all kinds of caregiving. Parents who stay home, parents who work, single parents, foster parents, people caring for elderly relatives. No one should ever sit in an interview in this building again and be made to feel small for choosing love over career advancement. James smiled, really smiled, the kind of smile that transformed his entire face. Done. Absolutely done. 3 months later, Marcus stood in front of the entire company at the quarterly all-hands meeting. Lily sitting in the front row with a rainbow drawing she'd made for the occasion, and announced the new parental support initiative, fully paid parental leave for all caregivers, on-site childcare, flexible scheduling, return-to-work programs for people re-entering after caregiving gaps, and a complete overhaul of hiring practices to value diverse experience paths. The policy was called the Sarah Chen Initiative, named after the surgeon who'd saved countless lives and understood that raising a child was equally vital work. Victoria Hunt had resigned the day after Marcus was hired, but before she left, she'd come to his office, the corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows, and apologized, with tears streaming down her face, explaining that she'd given up custody of her own children for her career years ago. and seeing him triggered every regret she'd buried. Marcus had listened with compassion and told her that it was never too late to make different choices, and he'd later learned she'd moved across the country to be closer to her adult children, trying to rebuild what she'd lost. James's son attended the all-hands meeting too, sitting next to Lily, and afterward, Marcus watched as James knelt down to his boy's level and asked about his upcoming science fair project, really listening, really present, and the wonder on that child's face was worth more than any stock option or title. The quantum encryption product launched successfully and revolutionized the industry. But what Marcus was proudest of was the letter he received from a single mother who'd been hired through the new inclusive hiring program. She'd been out of work for 8 years raising her autistic son, and she wrote that the interview at Quantum Solutions was the first time anyone had asked what she'd learned from her caregiving experience, rather than making her defend the gap in her resume. On the 2-year anniversary of Marcus joining the company, he and Lily visited Sarah's grave, and he told her about everything: the job, the changes, the way her sacrifice and love continued to ripple outward, changing not just their lives, but hundreds of others. Lily placed a drawing on the headstone, 2 stick figures holding hands under a rainbow, with the words, "Mommy's Promise," kept written in her careful 10-year-old handwriting. That night, Marcus tucked Lily into bed in their new apartment, nothing fancy, but theirs, filled with light and laughter and possibility, and she looked up at him with Sarah's eyes and asked, "Daddy, are you happy now?" And Marcus realized that happiness wasn't the goal, had never been the goal. The goal was meaning, was integrity, was showing up every day as your full self and refusing to let the world make you small. "I'm proud," he told her, kissing her forehead. "Proud of who we've become, proud of how we've honored Mommy, proud of you for reminding me every single day that love is the most important work we ever do." Lily smiled and closed her eyes, safe and certain in the knowledge that she was cherished, and Marcus sat in the quiet apartment, thinking about the trajectory of transformation, how a single moment of courage, a choice to speak up instead of walking away, had changed everything. Not because he'd been rewarded for his brilliance, but because 2 broken people had chosen to see each other's humanity and build something better from their shared pain. The moral of the story wasn't that talent always gets recognized, or that justice always prevails. It was simpler and deeper than that. Was that the work of caring for another human being is never wasted, never small, never something to hide or apologize for, and that sometimes the greatest innovation isn't a new technology or a brilliant algorithm, but the radical choice to build a world that honors what truly makes us human, our capacity to love, to sacrifice, to show up for each other, and to recognize that every person carrying a worn portfolio and a child's drawing has a universe of worth inside them, waiting to be seen.